Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a legend, a character so unique, so enduring that he really transcended the very sport he dominated. We're talking about the Undertaker. Just the name, it evokes chills, awe. A presence unlike any other. You sent us this really fascinating collection of sources about his incredible, 3-decade-long career, charting his journey from, well, an aspiring athlete to a global wrestling icon. Our mission today is to dig deep into this whole saga, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the insights, and understand not just what happened, but why it still resonates so much. So get ready for a real deep dive into the Deadman himself.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, and something I think we can learn a lot from, is how this one guy's journey, starting from a completely different dream, really, to becoming this wrestling phenomenon, doesn't just reflect his own personal tenacity, which was immense, obviously, but it also kind of mirrors the constantly evolving landscape of professional wrestling itself. We'll explore in detail how Mark William Calaway, the man behind the persona, meticulously crafted arguably the most captivating, long-lasting, and impactful character in WWE history. We'll look at his genius, both in front of the cameras and, importantly, behind them, too. And this brings up a big question right away, one to keep in mind throughout. How does character stay not just relevant, but iconic for that long? And what can we take away from that kind of prolonged, dramatic transformation? What does it teach us about adapting, about reinventing yourself?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because before he was The Undertaker, before the world knew him as the Deadman, he was just Mark Calaway. And he had this completely different dream. Can you believe his big ambition was actually to be a professional basketball player? It just feels like such a world away from, where he ended up.
It absolutely is, and it's a really crucial piece of the puzzle in understanding his whole trajectory. Our sources show he was, deeply committed to that goal. Studying sports management down in Texas, pretty much singularly focused on a pro basketball career. He put his early 20s into it. And look, he had the presence, right? 2.03 meters, that's imposing. He definitely stood out. However, and this is where things start to shift in the super specialized, highly competitive world of top-tier pro basketball. That height, impressive, sure. But it was considered only, quote, average midfield for someone hoping to make the NBA. It sort of hinted that maybe he didn't have that truly elite specific talent needed for the absolute highest level of that sport. The crazy quickness, the vertical leap, the pinpoint shooting, the stuff that really separates the stars. That's kind of a stark reminder, isn't it? Even with great physical gifts and ambitions, sometimes the exact skill set for one path just isn't quite there. Recognizing that is, well, that's an insight in itself.
So what does that mean then for his path? How does that basketball dream, which sounds like he was really invested in, how does that eventually pivot into becoming a wrestling legend? It feels like such a sharp turn, almost out of nowhere.
Well, you could say fate played a part, sure. But I think more deeply, it's about recognizing your other strengths and having the foresight, maybe even the guts, to grab a totally new opportunity when it shows up. The qualities he did have, that impressive look, a kind of natural charisma even without speaking, and just being incredibly physically fit, maybe not elite for basketball, but they were exactly what wrestling promotions were looking for back then. That raw, imposing physical presence combined with this ability to connect, even silently. It made him a super compelling prospect for wrestling. Apparently, the offer to become a pro wrestler was so compelling, so immediate, that he made a really clean break, dropped out of college right before graduating to go for it. That really shows you the pull, right? The potential that wrestling seemed to offer him right then. Just to give you a sense of his grit, his determination before he was making consistent money in wrestling, the sources mentioned he actually worked as a bouncer for a while, which wasn't just a side job, It shows he was willing to do whatever it took, grind it out, make ends meet while chasing this new, uncertain, but ultimately, destined career.
Okay, so what about those early days? Before he hit the big time, before The Undertaker became this global thing, it wasn't an overnight sensation, was it? He didn't just walk into the WWF and boom, legend.
Oh, far from it. Not at all. His very first pro contract was signed way back in 1984. World Class Championship Wrestling, WCCW. Big Texas promotion. He spent 4 years there. 4 formative years. Absolutely crucial time for him to learn the craft. Understand the psychology, the timing, the tech stuff, the whole business. It was really his apprenticeship. Learning character work, ring psychology, how to work a live crowd. But even with the obvious potential, he struggled at first to get a stable long-term deal with the bigger national promotions. So that led to this challenging time where he was doing a lot of guest spots, smaller independent shows all over the place, sometimes even overseas. It was a real grind. Travel, smaller crowds, just building experience and getting his name out there bit by bit. He wasn't instantly pegged as a future icon. It was a slow climb. He even did some brief stints experimenting in other places. He was Mean Mark Callis in WCW. Totally different vibe, right? Rougher. and even wrestled in Japan as Punisher Dice Morgan for New Japan, NJPW. Highly competitive scene over there. These were all like stepping stones, periods of trying things out, growing.
The real turning point, though, the moment it all clicked into place, where he found his home, that was signing the long-term deal with the WWF in 1990. That's when the foundation for the legend was truly laid.
Okay, so he finally lands in the WWF. 1990.
Oh, no.
And what an entrance. I mean, this wasn't just another wrestler showing up. This felt like an event. It immediately set him apart. You knew something different was happening.
Well, absolutely. It was a masterclass in how to introduce a character. The legendary start was Survivor Series 1990, big pay-per-view. He's introduced as this total mystery, literally the mystery partner for Ted DiBiase's $1 million team. So right away, there's intrigue, anticipation. And his look was just iconic from day one. Meticulously crafted. Comes out in this long, dark cloak, the wide-brimmed hat shading his eyes, that oversized, almost theatrical tie. And he's got his first manager, the very flamboyant Brother Love with him, known for his kind of grating preaching style, is the visual that just grabbed your attention. Unsettling. What's interesting, though, and people forget this about his debut match, he wasn't immediately unbeatable. He actually got counted out trying to protect Brother Love. Almost self-sacrificial. Surprisingly human, really, considering the persona you developed later. An interesting first step for a character who became all about dominance and, seeming invulnerable.
And he didn't stay with Brother Love very long, did he? It feels like the real mystique, the power, it really started to build when he got paired with Paul Bearer. What was the thinking there? How big was that partnership?
You're totally right. Moving from Brother Love to Paul Bearer was, well, it was a pivotal strategic move, a masterstroke, really, for the character. Brother Love introduced him, yeah, but his whole over-the-top, talkative thing kind of diluted Undertaker's silent, imposing vibe. So the decision to bring in Paul Bearer as his mouthpiece soon after, absolutely instrumental. That pairing defined the WWF in the 90s. Truly iconic. Bearer's looked the ghoulish, morbid thing, pale face, that high-pitched, echoing voice, and the urn. Always carrying that haunting, mystical urn. It became inseparable from the Undertaker's whole deal. It was genius because it let Undertaker stay silent, stoic, imposing, preserve that otherworldly feel. Bearer did the talking, translated the Deadman's intentions, basically. He deepened the supernatural stuff, added layers of macabre lore, and from then on, Taker's dominance was just immediate, undeniable. He started racking up these quick, decisive squash victories over lower card guys. Just systematically established his power. Made him seem unstoppable, unkillable almost. He didn't just win, he obliterated them. And crucially, this is when the legendary WrestleMania streak began. That first Mania win against Jimmy Superfly Snuka, that laid the first brick. Set the stage for decades of unbelievable WrestleMania performances.
It's incredible how fast he shot up the ranks. He wasn't just beating jobbers, he was hitting major milestones, like winning the championship within a year. That's crazy fast.
Meteoric is the word. Really speaks to the impact of the character, the presentation. Just 1 year after debuting, at only 26 years old, he does something huge. Becomes the youngest WWF champion ever by beating Hulk Hogan, no less, at Survivor Series 91, taking out the biggest star in the company. Now, he only held the title for 6 days. It was a short reign. Controversial circumstances led to him losing it back quickly, but beating Hogan at that point. You can't overstate how significant that was. Instantly made him a main character. Not just a monster heel, but someone who could reach the absolute top, dethrone the guy who'd been the face for years. It showed his unique appeal and the company's massive belief in him as a top draw. After that, he kept adding to the WrestleMania streak. Got wins against guys like Jake the Snake Roberts at Mania 8th and that massive giant Gonzalez at Mania next. Those big wins just cemented his high standing, proved he could beat top guys, even physically imposing ones, even if he couldn't quite get the title back right then. His presence alone, the aura, that was enough to signal he was elite, untouchable.
Right. Okay, so this is where we see that first really big shift, the dramatic transformation from that kind of stoic, almost Western mortician figure to something truly, definitively supernatural, otherworldly. That was groundbreaking stuff back then, not just a costume change. It felt fundamental.
Absolutely, and this is key to his longevity, his adaptability. The first huge turning point, the one that redefined him, came with that casket match loss against Yokozuna, the massive 600-pound Samoan, Royal Rumble 94. The spectacle of them getting sealed in the casket by like half the roster was one thing. But then, shortly after, in this moment of pure wrestling theater, the Undertaker's ghost appears on the big screen and seems to float up towards the arena ceiling, complete with lightning, thunder, fogs, the whole 9 yards. This wasn't just effects, it was a narrative statement. This moment signaled the definitive end of that initial Western Undertaker gimmick, shedding the last bits of the stoic cowboy mortician, and marked his full embrace of the supernatural, spectral Deadman persona. The insight here is how you can use a major loss creatively to actually free up a character. Let them have this profound, almost mythical rebirth that re-energizes the audience and opens up totally new story avenues. It let him become truly unearthly.
And then came that whole Undertaker angle, right? And that really played into the supernatural rebirth idea, didn't it? It blurred the lines, even for hardcore fans, questioning who the real Undertaker even was.
Exactly. After that dramatic death and vanishing act, he was gone for a while. A significant absence, which only built up the mystery, the anticipation for his return. He even missed WrestleMania 10, which was huge. Then Ted DeBeegis, the $1 Million Man, in this brilliant piece of booking, brings back a resurrected Undertaker. Controversial stuff. But pretty quickly, sharp-eyed fans noticed something was off, and the story confirmed it. This was a doppelganger, played by Brian Lee, who was actually Mark Calaway's real-life cousin. This imposter got nicknamed, maybe a bit mockingly, the Undertaker by the fans. The storyline cleverly built up the hype for the real Deadman's return, created this clear contrast, the authentic versus the imitation. And that return, electrifying, SummerSlam 1994, the real Undertaker comes back, battles, and decisively beats his fake counterpart. That win didn't just prove his authenticity and power, it really marked the definitive birth of the Deadman character we came to know. Established him as this singular, irreplaceable force. It was a narrative trick that not only explained his absence, but also heightened the mystique when he came back. No doubt left about who the true supernatural power was.
So he's back, the undisputed Deadman. Feels like he's set for a title run, right? That's the logical next step. But it didn't quite go that way, did it? This is where a truly legendary and really brutal feud kicked off.
Indeed. He seemed poised for the title, yeah. But a planned shot, one that looked like it would put him back on top, was dramatically, violently stopped by Mankind, the unpredictable, deranged Mankind, played by Mick Foley. That interference sparked what became one of the most bitter, hateful, and just physically brutal feuds in wrestling history. It really pushed boundaries. Their animosity was just palpable, escalated super quickly into these incredibly violent matches. A really significant moment early on was the Boiler Room Brawl. Unique, claustrophobic match type, suited the dark character. But what made it truly unforgettable wasn't just the setting. It was Paul Bearer's shocking betrayal. Unthinkable at the time. Bearer, who'd been Taker's loyal manager, his confidant, the keeper of the urn for years, inexplicably turns on him, attacks Undertaker with the urn, the symbol of his power. That let Mankind slap on his finisher, the mandible claw, and get the win. That turn just sent shockwaves through the whole fan base, shattered this iconic partnership. And it set up a new dynamic for Undertaker, now alone, without his guide, more isolated, but maybe even more dangerous.
And the betrayals, the punishment, it didn't stop there, did it? That first ever buried alive match, another pivotal, brutal moment, really showed how many enemies the Deadman had made.
Absolutely. That visceral betrayal by Bearer just intensified the feud with Mankind, led to the first ever buried alive match at In Your House 11. Aptly named, right?
Okay.
In this unprecedented match, Undertaker actually managed to beat Mankind. Choke slammed him into the grave dug at ringside. Seemed like he buried him alive, but you know how it is in wrestling. The story's never that neat. Undertaker by then was such a huge, feared threat that a bunch of the other wrestlers, mostly the villains, the heels, they swarmed him. In this shocking turn, they ganged up and made sure Undertaker himself ended up buried alive. In the very grave he dug for Mankind. This wasn't just a match finish, it was another big turning point. Echoed his earlier deaths, reinforced this idea that even the Deadman, despite the supernatural stuff, could be temporarily stopped, put down, but never truly finished. These theatrical burials became symbolic, didn't they? Each time his eventual return felt even bigger.
Just when you think you've got a handle on the Undertaker, he comes back. Even darker this time. More rebellious, vengeful. He's not just a character anymore. He's constantly reinventing, evolving into this intimidating Lord of Darkness.
Indeed. This period really cemented his genius for evolving the character. After that second burial, he returns with this even more menacing, almost demonic presence, fully embracing the Lord of Darkness persona. His first target, obviously, was Paul Bearer for that unforgivable betrayal, and he went after him with this dark, relentless fury. Even though Bearer kept trying to sabotage him, interfere, the Lord of Darkness was just unstoppable in his quest for revenge and for dominance. He eventually won the WWF Championship again at WrestleMania 13, beating Psycho Sid. This whole era, with these dramatic shifts from stoic mortician to supernatural entity, now to this vengeful, darker force, it really makes you ask, how does someone keep that level of relevance, that intrigue, through such big, frequent changes? For Undertaker, I think it was the commitment. He fully committed to each new persona, made each version feel authentic, like a natural progression within his dark story. He kept finding new, darker corners of the Deadman idea, kept audiences guessing, captivated.
And then, The ultimate secret, the one from his past, held back for so long, finally revealed, leading to one of the most iconic, truly electrifying debuts in wrestling history, the unveiling of Kane, his monstrous half-brother. That storyline just changed everything.
The narrative came even more complex then. Personal, emotional, almost Shakespearean family drama, really. Paul Bearer, still trying to mess with Undertaker's head, escalates the mind games, threatens to reveal his deepest, darkest secret, that Undertaker was supposedly responsible for the fire that killed their parents and his younger half-brother Kane when they were kids. Taker vehemently denied it, blamed Kane, insisted his brother was dead. This back and forth built incredible tension for weeks. Agonizing. Then, the debut, Kane, Bad Blood, 1997. During Taker's Hell in a Cell match against Shawn Michaels, a classic in itself, the atmosphere was terrifying. The whole arena goes deep red, fire shoots up from the ramp, and this massive masked figure, Kane, with Paul Bearer, marches to the cell. And the moment that gives everyone chills becomes instantly iconic. He doesn't just open the cell door, he literally rips the door off its hinges, physically shows his monstrous power. Then he hits Undertaker with a tombstone piledriver. Taker's shocked, paralyzed. Kane instantly establishes this destructive force, ignited one of the most enduring, complex sibling rivalries ever. Fire, betrayal, deep-seated hatred. It had everything.
That debut absolutely set the stage, brother versus brother. But it also led to another legendary Hell in a Cell match, didn't it? One that's just etched into history for the sheer brutality.
Precisely. The first Taker versus Kane match was at WrestleMania 14th. Highly anticipated. Taker won that one. He also won the rematch, an even crazier Inferno match, where the ring was surrounded by actual fire, but their rivalry. Far from over, it became this recurring theme throughout Taker's career, popping up again and again. Meanwhile, Mankind re-emerged as Taker's main foe, which led to another legendary encounter, one that redefined in-ring violence. Hell in a Cell at King of the Ring, 1998, against Mankind. That match wasn't just a fight, it was, like our source says, a fight for the history books. A performance art piece in sheer brutality. Mankind took two horrifying falls. First off the top of the 20-foot cell through the announce table, then somehow he gets back up, climbs again, and crashes through the cell roof onto the ring. Lost consciousness briefly. Unimaginable punishment. Career-threatening stuff. And yet Mankind miraculously kept going. Undertaker still won, yeah. But it was a testament to both guys' endurance and just how brutal that cell structure was. That match, more than any other, maybe solidified the Deadman and Hell in a Cell as this unparalleled combination. Linked his dark character to that brutal structure forever. For Taker, the cell wasn't just a cage, it amplified the brutality. It became his personal playground, his tomb, an extension of his dark persona, his home, you could say.
So from brother against brother, and then surprisingly, this darker unified front emerges. The Ministry of Darkness. Wow, that was a wild, controversial, and just hugely impactful period for the WWF's whole Attitude Era.
It really was total chaos, narratively daring stuff. After a surprise joint attack on Kane, Undertaker, and Paul Bearer, against all odds, shockingly reunited, formed the Ministry of Darkness. Ominous, terrifying faction. They were supposedly under the command of this mysterious, unseen higher power, and their goal, total control of the WWF, felt genuinely threatening. They built this dark army, recruited sinister characters, the Brood, you know, Christian, Edge, Gangrel, future stars, the Acolytes, Bradshaw, Farouk, tough guys, and the big monsters, Midian and Viscera. Formidable group. The storylines got really shocking, pushed boundaries, controversial. Remember the one where Taker tried to marry and literally sacrifice Stephanie McMahon, the boss's daughter? On live TV, Mr. McMahon's own faction, the corporation, stopped the actual sacrifice, but they couldn't really stop the ministry's reign of terror. Then, in this hugely controversial twist, often debated, the corporate ministry formed, an alliance between the two groups, and McMahon himself is revealed as the higher power. Polarizing stuff for fans, but that whole powerful faction, it disbanded pretty abruptly. Undertaker got injured, a groin injury, apparently, which, again, almost like clockwork, set the stage for another radical character change. Injury or setback often spurred his biggest reinventions, didn't it?
Okay, from the supernatural Lord of Darkness to a biker. On a Harley, bandana, shades. This transformation of the American Badass around 2000, that was maybe the most jarring one for longtime fans. Felt like a complete 180 from everything we knew.
And you're right, it was jarring, but also strategic. A radical departure, yeah. Marked this fundamental shift away from the ethereal supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
Toward the more human, gritty, kind of rebellious persona. He famously swapped the urn, the symbol of his dark power, for a big Harley-Davidson. Made these thunderous entrances on it, usually to Kid Rock or Limp Bizkit. This wasn't just random, though. It was a calculated move. Reflected the changing landscape, the Attitude Era shifting towards more realistic, edgy characters. And you had all these new stars coming in from WCW posing a threat. So this decision really highlights that adaptability, right?
Yeah.
What you need to do to stay relevant, connect with a changing audience in a super competitive field. It showed that Mark Calaway was willing to shed even iconic parts of his character to stay fresh, compelling, to connect with a younger, edgier audience that valued authenticity, rebellion. It was a conscious effort to stop the Deadman from getting stale.
And with this new, more human persona, we actually saw his real life bleeding into the storylines, which is totally unheard of for Undertaker before, right? His personal life was so fiercely protected with the old gimmick.
Absolutely. Bringing his personal life in was bold, unprecedented for a character who lived behind such deep kayfabe that carefully built illusion of reality in wrestling. His feud with Diamond Dallas Page, DDP, was the big example. DDP, former WCW guy, infamously stalked Taker's then-wife, Sarah, on TV, made the rivalry intensely personal, blurred the lines between story and reality in a way that really grabbed people, shocked them too. This storyline let Undertaker, now nicknamed Big Evil, show a more understandable human side. Even while still being this imposing force, his actions, trying to protect his family, felt relatable, authentic, revealed these new facets of the character fans had never seen. It proved the man behind the Deadman with human emotions, vulnerabilities, could be just as captivating, maybe even more so than the purely supernatural version. Gave him new layers.
He was still a dominant force, though, even as a biker. But this era also saw him face some really tough challenges, especially from that new guy, that rising star, Brock Lesnar. That felt like a real changing of the guard was happening.
Indeed. Character Chef didn't mean he wasn't still top tier. He beat Ric Flair at WrestleMania X8, huge match. Had a solid 2-month run as the WWE Undisputed World Heavyweight Champion. Proved he was still main event. Then he moved over to the new SmackDown brand, which was becoming the place for hungry new talent. But his path back to the WWE title ran straight into Brock Lesnar, who was exploding onto the scene as next big thing, legit monster athlete. And he proved to be an almost unbeatable opponent for Taker. That was crucial for both guys. Taker took a big clean loss to Lesnar in Hell in a Cell at No Mercy 2002. Surprising for Taker in his signature match. Then 2003, No Mercy again, and that biker chain match. Lost to Lesnar again. This time, Vince McMahon directly interfered, helped cause a defeat. Lesnar just felt like this immovable object, a legit threat who could actually beat The Undertaker cleanly. Few could say that. It really signaled a passing of the torch, even if Taker wasn't quite ready to hand it over yet.
And speaking of Vince McMahon, their personal feud around then, it felt different from Vince's usual calculated moves, didn't it? Felt more personal. And it ultimately led to another burial for Taker, bringing that whole American badass era to a close.
You're absolutely right. Vince made some brilliant moves during the Monday Night Wars, super competitive time, but our sources suggest that making Undertaker this personal, bitter enemy maybe wasn't his smartest play. Quote, a poorer idea compared to his usual strategic genius. It felt less like business, more like a personal vendetta, risking one of his biggest stars. This animosity, fueled by McMahon wanting to basically end Taker's career, led to another buried alive match, Survivor Series 2003. And much to the disappointment of fans hoping Vince would get buried, nope, McMahon wasn't the one who went in the ground. Instead, in this shocking twist orchestrated by Vince, it was Kane. Kane again betrayed Taker again. Buried him, declared him dead and buried forever. This served as the definitive actual death of the American badass gimmick. Led to another long absence from TV for Taker. Left fans wondering, is this really it? Is this the end of his career? Seemed like a final ending to that more human chapter.
But of course, as we know, the dead man always rises again, buried for the third time, but finds a way back. This next era, though, it became all about one thing, one incredible stat, the streak.
Indeed. He really proved he was a living legend, unparalleled resilience. However, the time he returned to, the ruthless aggression era, it was all about young, hungry stars trying to make their mark. Aggressively wasn't maybe the easiest fit for established legends. The style was shifting, more athletic, maybe more realistic. And you had Randy Orton calling himself the legend killer. He specifically targeted the streak, wanted to make his name by being the one to finally beat Taker at WrestleMania. Now, Orton couldn't do it at Mania 21, failed on the biggest stage, but he did beat Taker 5 months later at SummerSlam. Big win for Orton. And like our source says, it seemed to take some wind out of Taker's sails for a bit. Showed that even if the streak held at Mania, Taker wasn't invincible year-round. That vulnerability started adding a new kind of drama.
But then, almost out of nowhere, it felt like, his actual in-ring performance seemed to hit this whole other level, a new wave of championship success. He was having some of the absolute best matches of his entire career.
That's right. His wrestling just reached this undeniable peak, really starting around the 2007 Royal Rumble. He comes in at number 30, the last guy, and wins the whole thing. His first ever Rumble win. Huge milestone. Got him a title shot at Mania. He chose to challenge Batista for the World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania 23. Formidable opponent. And get this. It was his 15th Mania match, but only his second title shot at the big show. Shows how the character transcended titles, how the streak itself was becoming the ultimate prize. Their feud was super balanced, physical. People actually thought the streak might end there to really establish Batista as the guy. But Taker won, streak goes to 15. He off, rematches against Batista, last man standing. Steel cage ended controversially in draws. Kept both guys strong, kept Taker's mystique intact. It was actually Edge who ended that first world title reign. Cashed in his Money in the Bank contract on a weakened Taker, showed how hard it was to beat him clean. Then after an injury, Taker wins the world title back at WrestleMania 24 against Edge in the main event. Proved he could still reach the very top, even in his 40s.
And then came what so many people consider the defining rivalry of his later career, the Shawn Michaels saga. Those two matches, just legendary. You cannot talk about the streak without talking about Shawn Michaels.
Absolutely cannot. Era-defining rivalry. Elevated both guys to even higher legendary status, if that's possible. WrestleMania 25, 2009. Taker versus Shawn Michaels. Hugely anticipated. Made even better because, believe it or not, Taker had never actually beaten Michaels one-on-one before. Added this psychological layer. Michaels made it clear he was coming to end the streak. Framed it as the ultimate challenge, the one thing he hadn't done in that match. Instantly went down as maybe the greatest WrestleMania match ever. Pure storytelling masterpiece in the ring. The drama was just palpable. Every near fall, every kick out. You genuinely felt Taker could lose. Real shock and emotion in the building. At 44, Taker reached this absolute wrestling peak. World-class performance. Showed athleticism, narrative depth that just defied his age. That match didn't just add to the streak. It cemented his place on WWE's Mount Rushmore. Unequivocally. Masterclass in psychology, timing, action. Left everyone breathless.
And of course, Michaels being Michaels. Relentless competitor. He wasn't satisfied. He had to have another shot, leading to the ultimate stakes. Streak versus career. That stipulation just raised everything to an unimaginable level.
You got it. Shawn Michaels, haunted by losing at Mania 25, became obsessed, demanded a rematch, relentlessly. Taker initially refused. Said Michaels had nothing left to prove. Their last match was a classic, couldn't be topped. But then Michaels cost Taker his world title. Controversially, that made it personal. Taker, pride wounded, finally accepted, but only with that monumental stipulation. If Michaels lost, his career was over. Done. Streak versus career. So huge it main evented WrestleMania 26 in 2010, bigger than any title match. It wasn't just a rematch, it was the culmination, and it somehow surpassed the previous classic, another incredibly emotional, perfectly paced masterpiece. For a lot of fans, those two matches together, best in Mania history. Period. Testament to the chemistry, the story, the emotion, the streak held. 18-0. And in this truly unforgettable emotional moment, Shawn Michaels' legendary career ended. Just like that. Epic conclusion to an epic rivalry, with devastating real consequences for one of them.
Wow. After those matches, his career understandably got quieter. Moved into more of a part-time role. The physical toll was obvious. But then came the final, shocking, and for so many, heartbreaking chapter of the streak itself.
Yeah, those small injuries, they add up. And the cumulative toll of nearly 30 years in that brutal business, it contributed to the shift. The Deadman gimmick, visually, stayed pretty consistent, but the character started changing, maybe more behind the scenes, in how people saw him. Mark Calaway's private life, which was always so guarded to protect the character's mystique, it became more visible. Public photos, like his wedding to Michelle McCool, another wrestler, they started chipping away at that sacred kayfabe, the illusion of reality that made guys like Taker so believable, so mystical. The lines between Mark Calaway the man and the Undertaker the character, they started blurring in public perception. Signaled a definite softening of that unique mystique. And you can see the physical toll starkly, like at WrestleMania 27 against Triple H. Taker won, yeah? But he couldn't leave on his own feet. Had to be carried out. Showed the immense punishment his body had taken. So we saw a rematch. WrestleMania 28, 2012, Hell in a Cell again. Dubbed End of an Era. He explicitly wanted to erase that image of him broken from the year before. Shawn Michaels, who knew them both so well, was the special ref.
Had another layer of emotion. Even a super kick from Shawn, followed by a pedigree from Triple H, couldn't break the streak. Taker wins again. 2-1 deal. Unbelievable. But that image after the match, the three of them, Taker, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, standing together, battered, exhausted, it truly felt like the end of an era. Symbolized a generational torch passing.
The wrestling world just held its breath. Total disbelief. And then at WrestleMania 30, the unthinkable happened. The streak, the single most protected thing in wrestling, finally ended. It was just universal shock.
WrestleMania 30, April 6, 2014. The opponent, Brock Lesnar. Again. And that match resulted in, arguably the single biggest shock in wrestling history. Full stop. The look on people's faces after 3 count. That shock paralysis, it was profound, universal. captured everywhere. A moment of collective stunned silence few things in entertainment ever achieve. And to this day, the decision to end the streak and to have Lesnar be the one causes huge debate, especially because the match itself, tragically, wasn't anywhere near the quality of those Michaels or Triple H classics, didn't live up to the moment, really, partly maybe due to a kind of lackluster buildup, didn't fully sell the stakes why Lesnar was the one. But critically, Taker got a severe concussion very early in the match, maybe hit his head on the ring post, botched spot, severely impacted the match's speed, intensity, everything. He was essentially wrestling concussed for most of it. And tragically, because of that concussion, he has no memory of the match, or the moments right after. Spent the night in a clinic nearby. For so many people, Taker's mythical, unbreakable legacy felt, well, broken that night.
A moment that truly redefined, and for some maybe permanently altered, his incredible career.
Wow. I mean, many people thought that had to be it. The streak broken. How do you even come back from that? Physically, psychologically. But incredibly, the career wasn't actually finished. How did he rebound from that moment?
Despite how huge the streak ending was, despite the personal toll of that concussed match, Mark Calaway's just deep passion for the business, his dedication, and this immense desire to silence the critics, prove he still had something left. It was just too strong. He wasn't going out like that. Shortly after he turned 50, showing incredible resilience, commitment to getting back in shape, he started that tough process of rebuilding his legacy. It was pretty remarkable. Showed that even a broken streak couldn't break his spirit, his will to perform, and he kept competing on the big stage. Beat Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 31, showed he could still go, and his rivalry with Lesnar wasn't quite over. Summer of 2015, Taker shocks everyone, confronts Lesnar, stops him winning the WWE title, sets up another rematch, SummerSlam against Lesnar. Now, the official record says Taker won by submission, but the fascinating, controversial truth, often glossed over, is that Taker actually tapped out, first time ever in his career, to Lesnar's Kimura lock. But the ref missed it. Controversial restart. Taker then hits a low blow, uses Hell's Gate to make Lesnar pass out. Felt like a desperate win, almost un-Taker-like. Showed how much Lesnar challenged him. The final end of their rivalry came later. Hell in a Cell. Taker's signature match, his playground. Despite Taker having way more cell experience, 12 matches to Lesnar's one, he lost again. To the Beast Incarnate. Blah, that definitively ended their chapter. Established Lesnar as the one guy who truly, consistently had Taker's number.
It really sounds like his physical condition was becoming this undeniable factor. You could see it. And the calls for retirement were getting louder, right? From fans, critics. How did that physical decline and the fact that we were seeing more of the man behind the character, how did that impact the whole mystique? The Deadman thing had been so fiercely protected for decades.
It became really clear, to everyone watching. He was past his physical prime, over 50 by then, nearly 3 decades in that punishing business. It showed in the ring. The smooth, powerful movements weren't always there, more deliberate, sometimes looked labored. And calls for retirement got much louder. Lots of fans, observers saying, hang it up, protect the legacy. Didn't want to see poor performances tarnish what he'd built. Plus, you had more interviews, documentaries, social media, showing Undertaker way outside his usual stoic, unapproachable role. That public visibility, which used to be unthinkable for his character, it just further eroded that kayfabe, that illusion of reality that was so key to his unique, mystical gimmick. The whole thing was clearly softening, as the source puts it, under the weight of real-world exposure. The challenge became, how do you deal with that? Embrace it, maybe, instead of fighting it.
So what does that mean for the final chapter, then? The man behind the Deadman is more visible than ever. How did he leverage that vulnerability, instead of just letting it be a sad, slow fade? This feels like one last brilliant reinvention.
This shift, weirdly, became this huge opportunity, a masterstroke in adapting this enduring character one last time. Instead of a sad end, defined by his limitations, his actual circumstances, his age, his history, the softening kayfabe they were intelligently used to give his career one final, powerful, and incredibly compelling push. It all culminated at WrestleMania 36 in 2020, in that totally unique cinematic Boneyard match against AJ Styles, who's widely seen as one of the best technical wrestlers, period. Styles brilliantly made it personal, directly addressed Taker's physical state, criticized his pace, even controversially blamed Taker's wife, Michelle McCool, for his never-quit mentality. Said she was pushing him past his prime. Ouch, that personal attack. Didn't diminish Taker. It was the catalyst, just like the DDP feud years before. When attacked personally, Taker shifted persona, ditched the dead man gear, came back as the American badass again. Leather jacket, motorcycle, the whole deal. And in that context, he excelled. Great trash talker, master storyteller, reminded you of his prime in that role. The Boneyard match itself, cinematically produced, blurring lines between wrestling and filmmaking. Arguably the biggest highlight of Mania 36. Really innovative way to tell a story, especially during a weird time. Nearly 30 years after signing with WWE, The Undertaker managed to reinvent himself again, thrill fans, cemented that unparalleled adaptability. And if you connect that to the big picture, this incredible ability to adapt, to constantly evolve through all these distinct personas, and then ultimately to even bring his real-life self, his vulnerabilities, his age into the character's story. That's precisely what makes The Undertaker so great, and arguably, yeah, the single greatest legend in wrestling history. His career is just this masterclass in staying relevant. Shows that authenticity, even if it means admitting limitations, can be this powerful tool for connection, for longevity.
What a journey. Just incredible. From a kid hoping to play basketball, finding this entirely different calling, becoming a mystical mortician, a terrifying lord of darkness, a rebellious American badass, and then finally a legend embracing his own mortality, his own vulnerabilities, to give us one last unforgettable performance. It's a profound testament to dedication, to constant reinvention, and the sheer power of storytelling in wrestling.
And it leaves us with a great question, doesn't it? Something for you, the listener, to think about after this. In our world now, where info travels instantly, trends change constantly, public figures are under the microscope, often needing to be authentic. How valuable is that ability to adapt, to shed old skins, redefine yourself, even after 30 years? The Undertaker's career. It's this compelling, unique case study. Shows the enduring power of a well-crafted narrative, both inside the ring and out. And the surprising strengths you can find, not just in dominance, but maybe in vulnerability too, and that willingness to just keep evolving.